You're listening to Consulting Logistics, presented by Aborn and Company. I'm your host, Kyle McNaught. Thanks for checking us out. Prior to the coronavirus outbreak, there were 3.7 million employees working from home at least half the time. While that number sounds like a lot, it actually only equates to 2.8% of the entire US workforce. Most workers, especially those in the logistics industry, don't have the ability to work from home. But in order to flatten the curve when it comes to the spread of the virus, more companies are allowing it. Now, while everyone has this picture of waking up late, working in your PJs, the reality is it can be even more stressful than just going into the office. Distractions, food, and being available while focused are a different animal when you aren't allowed to have close contact with your colleagues. Therefore, I wanted to get a real professional on the show to discuss some tips for what you should do if you find yourself working from home. In this episode, Blythe Brumleve of Digital Dispatch will provide actionable tips for you to try during your remote work. Blythe recently put out a podcast on the most successful tips for being yourself while working from home, which is a must watch or listen to if you haven't checked it out yet. You can check out all of Blythe's work at digitaldispatch.io. Again, I'll include links to all that in the show notes. In the meantime, enjoy the show. Hey, Blythe, how's it going?
It's going somewhat okay right now. It's just just a couple little stories going on in the news. I'm not sure if you've heard.
A couple of stories. I mean, there's one story that I have to get your take on, and I didn't tell you this in pre, but you got to tell me, give me 30 seconds on Brady. How pumped are you? How excited are you? I saw your Twitter. If anyone's ever followed Blythe, you know she's a giant Jaguars fan, so you've got to be excited beyond belief.
I mean, obviously, I'm super pumped because the Jaguars and the Patriots faced off in the AFC Championship game a couple years ago, and obviously it was heartbreaking for a lot of Jaguars fans, but I was mocked ruthlessly by like these teenage Patriots fans who've never known struggle in their life. And now I wake up today and I have the deep satisfaction that those 12-year-olds are now going to know what pain and suffering as a sports fan is really like. They're not going to be spoiled anymore. And so I find great joy in that, in a sadistic kind of way.
A little background on me. When I was growing up, I was a Pats fan. My whole family's from here in New England. Like, we're Boston based. But then I moved up here and I really just started to experience those 12-year-old fans and started to hate New England more and more because of what you're talking about. So I'm also in the same boat. It is pretty funny. I just remember back to the Super Bowl when the Hulu commercial came out and all my buddies running around the room screaming, Brady's coming back, Brady's coming back, just to get dropped the decommitting post on Instagram. It's not even Twitter, it's Instagram.
Life comes at you fast.
All right, well, we're not here just to laugh about Patriot misery. We're actually here to talk about working remotely because, as I kind of said in an intro, you have done this amazing job of working remotely. Not an amazing job of working remotely. You did this amazing job of putting out this list of sort of tips. So talk to me a little bit about your background. Kind of what are you doing? How have you been working remotely? How's this all kind of worked for you?
Sure. So, I mean, I guess I'll keep it somewhat short, but about 10 years ago, I started working both as a blogger and working at a 3PL here in Jacksonville, Florida. And so I've worked sort of coincide with sports and logistics for the past 10 years, which has eventually led into some other gigs here locally. And one of those was the opportunity to start my own business working from home called Brumleve Brands. And so I started that about 3 years ago. I left a traditional, well, I guess they're considered a 4PL now, but I left a 4PL 3 years ago in order to pursue this business full time. So since then, I have been working from home and trying to fine tune that experience ever since then.
And what exactly are you kind of doing with Digital Dispatch? Kind of talk me through that a little bit.
Sure. So Digital Dispatch is the transportation and logistics focus of Brumleve Brands. Brumleve Brands is more of just an umbrella company, while Digital Dispatch focuses strictly on the supply chain industry. And so what I help my clients do is create ROI driven websites in order to pursue their ultimate goals. And every, whether it's a carrier, whether it's a shipper, whether it's a 3PL, your goals are all different when it comes to your online experience. So I help craft that for this industry. And it just helps, I think, for a lot of these companies, that they don't have to go out and explain, what LTL is, or what a reefer truck is to a particular marketing agency, where they can come to me and I know all of that terminology already, so I can help them craft their plan faster and cheaper.
Yeah, that's one of the, especially kind of as my role as a digital marketer here at Aborn, it's sort of the same thing. Like learning that type of language is important, and it's kind of funny just how much you do get approached about doing this stuff when you're like, I don't think you know what LTL means.
Right.
Like it takes a little bit of time, but you have a ton of experience. And I mean, like you were saying kind of earlier, a lot of it, because of the nature of kind of your business, you work from home a lot. So that's sort of what I want to talk about, especially how you communicate and you work with carriers, shippers, 3PLs. You work with the logistics industry in a different environment than most of them are used to. A lot of times you're in the office, you're picking up the phone, you're calling, you're talking, which is a lot of stuff you do from home. But at the same time, you are home, which
Right.
is very interesting. So let's talk real quick first about sort of what the personal experience of work from home is like. Just because I'm assuming, even though 3% of the United States workforce does work from home, most people really don't get it as a routine experience. A lot of it is one-offs or something like that. Kid's sick, I got to stay home and work from home. Talk to me a little bit about sort of what the personal experience is like working from home for you, especially now that it is a routine type of thing. How, like, what time do you start? How long are you like staying focused? What's happening there?
Sure. So for me personally, I like to live and die by my schedule. What I'll do is every week, usually every quarter, I'll I'll sit down and I'll map out 3 to 4 goals that I want to accomplish for that quarter, and then I'll break it down into the month. This is a few big goals that I want to accomplish this month, and then I'll do it for the week, and then I'll do it for the day. And I will focus on the hardest task at hand. I'll do that first thing in the morning after I've woken up, had a couple cups of coffee, usually 2 or 3 before I really get going. And then I will dive into the hardest part of the project of the day. And then only after that's complete, and I'll usually set a deadline of about noon or 1 p.m. to get that finished. And then after that's done, that's when I'll have all of any kind of calls that I've had scheduled, meetings, all of those different things are put on the calendar after I take care of the most important task. Because I've found that if you start your day with email, it's really tough to, if you're working in a brokerage office or anything like that, it's really tough to not start your day with email. But I found that if I do start the day with email or phone calls, then it's just a situation where I'm taking care of a lot of little fires instead of one big fire. Where if I do it the reverse way, where I'm tackling the biggest project of the day, then it's a bigger sense of accomplishment, where I can still tackle all of the needs for my clients. I just won't make myself available to them 24/7.
Yeah, that makes tons of sense. I mean, I know we were talking a little bit before we actually started recording, but kind of one of the big feelings, because I get to work from home a little bit more routinely than most people too. And one of the bigger issues is just the feeling of how to feel productive. Because you don't have someone who's seeing what you do. So truly it's just work. And then kind of given the nature of our business, it's not like a physical product is created most of the time at the end of a lot of hard work and stuff. So how do you kind of feel productive? And then showing that's sort of one of the trickier elements of routinely working from home.
I think you have to be open with your communication or different project milestones and what the client should expect. So, for example, if we are launching a new website or we're launching a new content marketing plan, I will send along a project milestone of what we're going to achieve, the estimated date of when we're going to achieve it, and then I'll communicate them as those different milestones are hit. So that way they know and they can keep up to date of how we're you're working, but they don't have to be involved in the nitty gritty details of the project itself. They don't have to be copied in on all the emails unless they want to be. But most of the time, most of the clients that I work with, they'll start off that way, or they might start off that way where they want to be copied in on everything. But then that trust factor starts to build, and then they know that they're going to get their project updates as those milestones are achieved.
For milestones, do you typically use sort of just normal milestones you were using at the 3PL beforehand, or is there a different type of milestone you gotta do when it's kind of sort of going? There's not that physical kind of talking. Does that make sense?
Well, I think kind of where I think you're going is some clients are almost driven by those face-to-face interactions, those in-person meetings. And
Yeah.
I still love having, those in-person meetings. What really helps a ton is using, modern day technology, video conferencing. I was just on a FaceTime on Sunday talking about a new project. I don't typically advise working on Sundays. I kind of think that that's a day that you should rest. But if you're passionate about the project, like I am about that particular one, I was happy to do it. But utilizing modern day technology can give you those same face-to-face interactions without having to physically be there. Most of my clients will choose to just have a phone conversation, which is it's more than fine too, because then you can sort of get the gist and you can get their feeling and their tone through their voice instead of just all through email. If it's all through email, then it's really difficult to tell tone. So if something seems like it's going to get to a challenging place through email, then what I'll do is I'll just pick up the phone and I'll give them a call, or I'll set up a call. I won't, respond, emotionally or anything like that. If maybe something happens and there's a delay in the project and you sense a little bit of frustration on the client side, or you sense, or maybe there's just, that perceived frustration because it is coming through in on email. So sometimes it's just easier not to assume anything and just to hop on a call.
Yeah, but what about I know we've gone completely off the rails in terms of my rundown, but I'm just kind of find it fascinating. What about with the technology knowledge gap? It's funny because we started off when we started this whole recording, or before we even did any of that stuff, we were just sort of talking about like the platforms we're using to record this podcast, and just how sometimes when I have different guests on, the knowledge of technology is always interesting. Like, how do you work with that, especially kind of working with some of the higher ups and stuff like that? How do you kind of communicate, or how do you not let that be something that slows down the conversation, or impedes it in any way?
You have to break it down very step by step, sometimes screenshots, sometimes video clips, whatever works best for the client. That's kind of what you got to whip up and just make it as easy as possible for them. But there's also a level of trust that goes into it too. Say if a client maybe isn't familiar with certain technology, I will send them a breakdown ahead of time. Also giving yourself, I think, that leeway of 10 to 15 minutes and even though it sounds like a super long time, but sometimes it does take that long in order to get your settings, your sound right, your default microphones, your default video cameras, and just setting, browser permissions and things like that. I usually try to keep a notebook full of problems that I've run into in the past. So then that way I'll have an answer for them in the future, particularly with that client, or using that note-based system with another client. But most of them can usually get walked through with any of their tech issues via phone. There's only certain circumstances where I'm just like, just send me your login and I'll take care of it.
I love the 15-minute tip. That's exactly what I do too. It's just like I try to say like, hey, I'm going to be on there early. I try to make sure that I'm there to be able to talk through anything. It's always tricky, and I always try to get my hands on a piece of technology prior to actually having kind of the game time, so to say, when we actually have to perform with this thing. It's so important.
It's very important. It's challenging for a lot of people, but if they're going to be challenged with it ahead of time, I think it's important to ask those questions ahead of time, so then that way you are prepared to help.
I also think it helps too, just because given the sheer amount of experience you get, right? If practice makes perfect, you've got just a ton of experience with this technology. So you kind of know the kind of FAQ, the pain points people go through. So being able to just kind of, if you don't have that, especially if you're starting to work remotely and you know that, like, hey, I want to make sure I can video conference, I think a good tip is download it right now in practice. Like, figure out, like, try to break it, figure out what's wrong, try to figure out how you can quickly solve it, because you're going to need to be able to communicate that very quickly.
Right. Don't wait until 5 minutes before your meeting in order to start downloading software. That's going to be a recipe for disaster. And I'll admit I've done it before, and I've been in that exact situation where it's like you have a 10 a.m. meeting and it's 10:01 and you still can't figure out why your microphone isn't working for this
Oh yeah.
meeting. So it's one of those things where, and I think also having different options. Maybe if the computer mic is going to work, having that dedicated dial-in number where if it's just whatever, for whatever reason the software doesn't want to work from your desktop, you can at least pick up your phone. And I think Zoom is really great about having, that one click dial where you're dialing the 800 number, and then they're also adding in the access code, so you don't have to worry about any of that.
Oh yeah. So let's transition a little into the actual clients and the people you're working with, because I think that's where, for this audience, it's extremely insightful of what you can bring to the table, because you truly are working a lot with the truckers, the carriers, that type of stuff, and you're working in the remote environment. So talk to me a little bit about that experience. Is it different at all when you're working from home and you're working with these carriers, with these people? Or is it because most of the business really is kind of conducted over phone or email? Is there really a change? Do you notice anything different going from an office environment for these types of, for this industry, to a home office?
I would say the biggest thing that I still have to stress, both when I was working in an office and working remotely, is demanding your time to focus. And when I say that, I mean most of the time when people are working in marketing, you're doing a lot of copywriting, you're doing a lot of just project workflows and trying to figure out how this messaging is going to sound on this platform versus this platform, and it takes a lot of concentration. And if someone comes in and, interrupts you at your desk, or, tries to call you immediately, those are distractions that are going to mess up your focus. And I think I read somewhere that if you're distracted, it takes an average of 20 minutes to dive back into that project again with that same amount of energy. So what I like to do is I like to block everybody off. You have to demand that creative time, because in a trucking office, or in a brokerage floor, you know how busy it gets, and it's just people yelling over each other, and customer service yelling over to the dispatcher, and there's a lot going on. So demanding that time, whether it's in a quiet office, or whether it's calendar blocking, you have to demand it ahead of time. And I think that's one of my bigger challenges with a lot of clients is they want to call me all day, or they want to call me at 7 p.m. at night, or 7 a.m. in the morning. And it's like, guys, these are normal working hours. These aren't normal working hours for me. But then I have had to catch myself saying, well, this is a challenging time and this is a big demand time for a lot of carriers right now. So I have to make myself more readily available too. So I have to be demanding about that creative time, because I do have obligations to my current client workload. But then on the flip side, I do have to be able to be flexible with that dedicated time, because they're running like crazy right now, trying to keep all of the stores stocked with essential goods and some non-essential goods. So it's one of those things where you have to be a little bit flexible in your routine, and sometimes I'm always trying to find ways to improve my workload, and that's definitely been one of them since this coronavirus pandemic has hit.
Yeah, exactly. How do you communicate that? Like, do you find it's, you catch more flies with honey, or is it sort of, how do you keep that, especially sort of now? Like, I feel that the industry in general usually kind of has that urgency to it. It's let's go, let's go, let's go, let's go, let's wait. Let's go, let's go,
Right.
let's go, let's wait. But like, how do you communicate that? Because I feel like you just have a ton of experience in that type of thing, and now you've just got everyone peaking. Everyone's levels are full red right now. So what's the best way, or what have you experienced kind of being the best way to kind of communicate with the carriers and the truckers and stuff like that?
I think not getting frustrated, not getting, not bringing your maybe you already have anxiety that in with I mean how could you not with all of this news going on, but I think not bringing emotion into it. I had a client reach out to me last night, and it was close to 8 p.m. at night, and he was like, I want to run some ads starting tomorrow, and it's like, okay, well, I'm not going to answer this right now. I'm going to answer this text first thing in the morning, just to be able to put that barrier in place that, hey, I recognize you, but we're going to talk about this tomorrow. I have some, available time slot between X and Y. And if that works for you, then perfect, let's do it. But I can't, it's difficult to manage that kind of instant demand at times, especially during a time like this where I want to be helpful, I want to be accommodating. But I was telling you earlier during our pre-call that I have 4 calls scheduled today, and I can't put those guys on the back burner because someone reached out to me with a last minute demand. I'm going to try to make it work because, like I said, we have a lot of companies that are out here that are making sure that all of our stores are stocked, but I have to honor the obligations that I've already committed to, and I will work you in wherever I can. But it just has to be a working partnership. And I think the overwhelming majority of my clients fully understand that.
What about the opposite? What about when you need to get attention, especially because you don't have the face to face? Like it makes sense, right? You're working for clients, but what's your experience been like when we're kind of navigating through this crisis? How do you capture someone's attention? How do you kind of get them to give you the type of attention you need when you're kind of working on trying to execute a program or a project?
I think with a few, a few of my projects are going on as normally planned. There have been a couple of them that have said let's push pause on everything, which is completely understandable because those are the businesses that are ramping up right now, and they're in super high demand. So I think you just have to be you have to be fluid, and you have to have a good project management software, and that's what I live and breathe in. I have this one software program that I use, and I set due dates and different sort of milestones, and I adjust them accordingly for the clients that want to put things on pause and for the clients that want to move full steam ahead. But if they're not responding to me in a timely manner, then I usually know to just give them a nudge here in a few days. I'll send them a follow-up email in a few days. We'll set up another call. What has helped tremendously too are these online calendar bookings where they sync directly into either your Google Calendar or your Outlook calendar. And so any kind of customer who wants to book a time with me, I can just send them that link. That way there's no back and forth between the two of us of, oh, are you available this day and this time? No, I'm not. I'm available this day and this time. It just simplifies that workflow. And those are just little like added tips that I've added into my own workflow over the past year that have helped reduce that back and forth time. And if somebody needs to reschedule, it's available all via the link, and your schedule is already synced to this calendar, so they know your available time slots, and they know and the time slots you're not available aren't even an option.
Blythe, you're amazing because like when we planned this whole thing out, we were like, yeah, like just for the audience that you put out this amazing kind of tips for working from home list. And we're not really going too deep into that for this podcast because I want people to go watch, read, listen, it just kind of start digesting your content because it's so good. But it's funny because you're still adding new things. Like the calendar kind of app stuff is great. Like that's pieces of information that I wasn't even thinking about. So I think we'll start to kind of wrap up. You got 4 calls ahead of
Sorry.
you, so I don't want to take up too
I
much
think
of
you
your
just
time.
definitely heard one of my calendar notifications go off.
Completely fine. Hit me with this. What's one thing a lot of people are starting, like they're about to make work from home their routine for who knows how long, right? What's one thing you wish someone had told you at the beginning when you first kind of were like, all right, cool, I'm working from home from now on?
I think to define your work processes first. What's happening when because for a lot of companies that are making this transition to working from home, they don't really know what their expectations are of their employees. So right now we have a lot of employees going to work from home, and they almost think of it as maybe kind of like a vacation, like a day off, where you just got to answer a few emails and that's that. But it's on the managers and it's on the business leaders and executives of each of these companies to set realistic expectations. And you can't set those realistic expectations of your team until you define your work processes and your workflow. Sometimes those can be the most difficult things to define, but once you do define those, then you can set up realistic expectations of your employees. And even if they do step away from the computer to go do a load of laundry or to go, run to the grocery store and try to pick up something, without waiting in a 3-hour long line for water or toilet paper, then you'll understand and you'll be more understanding of that because, hey, they did take care of their most important tasks for the day. So if they're away from their desk for a little bit while longer in the middle of the day, I know that they've still accomplished everything that they would have accomplished had I been watching them, with eagle eyes in the office.
Right. And at the same time, if they're in the office, they're probably going to get distracted talking about
Yes,
Brady leaving. Like stuff was going to happen. It's not like people
exactly.
work 8 hours, no distractions. Like there's distractions constantly. But I love that point. Set the expectation. Like let them know how they can get in contact with you. Let them know how they can connect with you. Let them know where you're at.
Sure. So I primarily blog on digitaldispatch.io. It's a trucking and logistics platform. I share a lot of marketing insights, web development insights, overall strategy for trying to, make your name in this new digital landscape. So digitaldispatch.io. I also publish a podcast called Bonjour with Blythe, and I'm also on all the, the different social media platforms, all the things at Blythe Brum or at DigiDispatch.
Such a good follow too. You constantly are talking about all that stuff. You're always there. Absolutely follow you, Blythe. Thanks for joining me today. And
Thanks for having me.
I know you're talking. You're going to be doing nothing but like a lot of how to work remotely. So if you and listeners enjoyed this, go follow Blythe. She's going to continue putting out awesome resources and educational content that just helps you kind of navigate through this crisis.
And thank you so much for having me. And that shout out. That was a really good shout out.
I try. Thanks, Blythe.
And that's our show. Again, Blythe, I could not thank you enough for joining the show. I know that you have a huge plan kind of in place to be putting out a bunch of content, especially on how to kind of work from home, which is something I think a lot of people are going to need. So if you're a listener, go check out Digital Dispatch. Follow Blythe on all the social. She is so active. She's so much fun. She knows how to talk. She's a super fun personality. Everything between her Twitter conversations to her dope Instagram photos, just a really, really great follow, especially if you don't just want to be focused on one thing. Blythe is a jack of all trades. She's awesome. Super fun. One of these days we'll have to have Blythe on and we just talk about it, kind of her experience, because it's such a cool, interesting way of how she got where she is in the world right now. So yeah, check out Blythe, and thank you again, Blythe. I know you're probably on a phone call as I record this, so thank you for finding time for me. In the meantime, I'm going to kind of forego sort of a lot of the stuff I talk about and just really try to hit hard on this one thing that we're going to be doing at Aborn. One of the big passions we have here, especially something that we kind of see a lot when it comes to logistics, is just the lack of great resources and the lack of real kind of forums or opportunities for people to kind of talk openly about issues they have. And if you're a regular listener, you kind of been a part of Aborn for a while now, you know that we put out this thing called Trans Tech, which was really just the ability for shippers to come together with each other and sort of talk about their challenges and stuff. So in light of the COVID-19 coronavirus outbreak, we want to create that right now. So this Thursday, March, and I'm looking at the date right now because I don't have the top of my head, 19th at 11:30 a.m. Eastern time, we're going to try to do that. We're going to have a little forum for shippers to kind of join in and ask their questions in an open environment. We aren't there to talk about Aborn. We're going to try to moderate this and kind of host it, but that's it. It really is no sales, no none of that. Come in there, talk about your issues, ask questions. If you can't make the time, but you're kind of interested in this, send me your email of questions, kind of challenges, sort of what your experience is, and best practices too. It's not just all everyone saying doom and gloom. Help out. Let your fellow shippers kind of know what you're experiencing. What are some tricks or tips that you have? Again, I'm including a link in the show notes for that. Check out all our social channels for how to kind of register for that. Because it's sort of a quick thing we're doing, it's not really getting set up normally and as nice and kind of streamlined as you will. So again, reach out to me, Kyle at abornandco.com. I'm more than happy to help you set up for this thing. The only reason there's even a registration is just because it's what the platform forces me to do. So again, it's come in, have an open, honest conversation, and hopefully we can get a good amount of people in there to sort of just talk about, especially shippers, talking about kind of what they're experiencing and help us kind of all navigate through this crisis together. So for Blythe, I'm Kyle McNaught. Thanks for listening. Peace.